Welcome. My name is Josh Almeida, and I am very excited to bring to you our latest installment of Focus on Learning, brought to you by New Bedford Public Schools and New Bedford Cable Network. While the best way to find out what your child could be doing at home is to work directly with your child's teacher in school, we know these videos will help everyone keep learning active at home.
Good morning, boys and girls. Mrs. Andrade here from the Lincoln School. I'm going to be going over another math topic that you'll find in the second packet toward the end on fractions. So our overarching objective for today is going to be students will compare fractions using the symbols less than, greater than, or equal to. So let's get started. We're going to start here. We're going to make our objective a little bit more specific. So we are going to use symbols, but we're going to start with students will compare two fractions with common denominators using the symbols less than, greater than, or equal to. I really want to focus on common denominators and what that means. If a fraction has a common denominator, it means that the bottom numbers are the same in both fractions. So what I've done, I've given you a few clues to help you so that if you didn't have a picture or manipulative, using these bullets will help you. The first one, when the denominators are the same, they're common, look at the numerators to compare. So you don't look at the bottom number, you're going to actually be looking at the top number to decide which one is greater or less than. Here's another important point. The bigger the numerator, the greater the fraction. So a larger numerator, larger fraction. Let's try a few examples together. So here we have 2/3 and 1/3. Let's use our picture to shade in what 2/3 would look like. The numerator is a 2, so that means I would shade in 2 parts. Both wholes you'll see are divided into thirds, 3 equal parts. So we're going to go ahead and shade 1/3 and another third. This is what 2/3 would look like. On the other side, we're going to shade 1 part. So this is what 1/3 would look like. Now you ask yourself which one is greater. It's pretty easy to see, right? 2/3 is definitely a larger piece than the 1/3. Well, how would we write that with our symbols? If we read it from left to right, so this symbol would say 2/3 is less than 1/3. No. This one would say 2/3 is greater than 1/3. So that's what it would look like. Some of your teachers have used little clues like the smaller fraction eats the bigger one. It's like an alligator. It kind of looks like Pac-Man. You can decide if you want to use that, but just remember that the arrow points to the smaller fraction. Let's look at our next one. Both wholes, you'll notice, are the same. They're both broken into fourths. That's our common denominator. Here we're going to shade 2 out of the 4. So let's go ahead and do that. And here we're going to shade 3 out of those 4 because it's 3/4. When fractions have common denominators, it's really easy because you're just looking at the top number. The bigger the number, the bigger the fraction. You can see that if I gave you 2/4, you would definitely have less than 3/4. So the arrow points to the smaller fraction. We're going to do one more, and then we're going to shift our focus. 3/6, 5/6. Both wholes are broken into 6. We would shade in 3 parts here. Three parts out of 6 are shaded, and 5/6. So let's go ahead and do that. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So by looking at it, you know 3 is less than 5, but 3/6 is also less than 5/6. So the arrow points to the smaller fraction. This is one way to compare fractions. When they have the same denominator, it's really not that difficult at all. You just look at the top number, the numerator, and the bigger the numerator, the bigger the fraction. Now we're going to get into something that really is a little bit harder to understand for students. Still the same objective, but this time students are going to compare two fractions with common numerators. We're still going to use the symbols less than, greater than, or equal to. I've given you some clues to think about as we try this. When the numerators are the same, you look at the denominators to compare, so it's the opposite. Here's the tricky part. The bigger the denominator, the smaller the fraction. That's really hard for kids to understand, that something bigger could actually be smaller. But we're not talking about whole numbers, boys and girls. We're talking about fractions, parts of a whole. The denominator tells us the size of each piece. That's why the bigger that our denominator gets, the smaller the pieces are going to get. Let's do some examples so that you can understand what I'm talking about. Let's look at the first one. We've got the same size whole. You'll see that the squares are the same. But here we have 1/3. Here we have 1/4. What's in common are the numerators. They both have 1 and 1. So let's go ahead and shade in 1/3. This is what 1 out of 3 parts would look like. And then here we're going to shade in 1/4. So this is what 1/4 would look like. Remember, the denominator tells us how many parts that the whole was broken up into. So in this case, we broke that square into 3 parts. In this case, we broke it into 4. So look at the size of those pieces that I shaded. Look at the 1/3 by itself and the 1/4. You can pretty much see that 1/3 is actually greater than 1/4. That's what's difficult for students to understand, that a 3 could be bigger than a 4. But these aren't whole numbers, they're fractions. So 1/3 is greater than 1/4. That means the arrow actually points to the smaller fraction. 1/4 is less than a third. 1/3 is greater than 1/4. I'm going to write the word underneath to help you really visualize this so that you don't mix up the symbols. 1/3 is greater than 1/4. That's what that symbol's telling us. Let's look at our second example. In this case, our numerators are the same. We've got 2 out of 6, 2 out of 4. So 2/6, 2/4. By looking at the denominators, 6 is a bigger number. That means we took that whole and we broke it up into 6 parts. Here we took the whole and broke it up into only 4 parts. So the 6ths are actually smaller than the 4ths. So let's shade in 2 pieces so that you can see. Here's 2 out of my 6, and here's 2 out of my 4ths. If you were offered pizza, 2/6 of a pizza or 2/4, I definitely would want the 2/4. You're getting a half a pizza here. So 2/6 is less than 2/4. I'm going to go back again to my notes. When the numerators are the same, you look at the denominators. The bigger the denominator, the smaller the fraction. Okay? Last example that we're going to do here, and then we're going to move into some fraction bars. 3/4 versus 3/8. On this side, I'm going to shade in 3 parts out of my 4. 1, 2, 3. This is how much you'd be getting if I gave you 3/4. If I gave you 3/8, you'd be getting 1 piece, 2 pieces, 3 pieces. So look at that again. The smaller denominator is actually a larger size piece. If this were a candy bar and I offered you 3/4 or 3/8, I think most of you would want 3/4 because it's definitely a bigger piece. So 3/4 is greater than 3/8. I'm going to write the words here just for you to have a reference if you decide to look back at this. 2/6 is less. 3/4 is greater than. So there we have it, that 3/4 is greater than 3/8. So now that we have this down, we're going to go over and work on some samples from your packet. So I've brought with me page 535 from the second packet. And there's a word problem here that we're going to work on together. And I've brought along some of my fraction cubes so that we can visualize it. We won't have the picture, but we'll use the cubes. So let's go ahead and read this first. We have Erica and Ethan have same-sized glasses. Erica's glass is 4/6 full of juice. Ethan's glass is 5/6 full of juice. Compare 4/6 and 5/6 using less than, greater than, or equal to. Who has more juice? I'm just going to circle the two fractions that I'm going to be looking at. I'm going to be looking at 4/6 for Erica and 5/6 for Ethan. So that's important that I look at that and I'm clear on whose cup is which. Then I want to circle the word who has more so that I understand that my answer is not going to be a fraction, but it's going to actually be a name of who has more. So let's show the fractions. I'm going to show you Erica's first. She has 4/6. So I've taken my whole. I'm going to take 2 off because I only need 4. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. And then Ethan has 5/6. What you'll notice about this is that they have common denominators. They both are cut into 6. So remember what we talked about. When a fraction has common denominators, you look at the top number. The more parts that you shade, the bigger the fraction. Here we have 4/6. Here we have 5/6. So clearly, Erica has less juice than Ethan. We're going to write this using the symbols. We're going to write it first. So we're going to write 4/6. And I'm going to write the name Erica above it just so that we know that that's who we're talking about. And then for Ethan, we're going to write 5/6. And then we're going to put the symbol in the middle. So Erica and Ethan. Erica has 4/6, Ethan has 5/6. They're both 6. So the top number is what we look at, the numerator. Erica has less than Ethan. So my answer would actually be, who has more juice? Ethan has more juice. So that would be how we would answer that word problem. And it's really nice when you can use the manipulatives. If you don't have manipulatives at home, you can make fraction bars. You can take paper and fold the strips into the same equal parts. We're going to do one more together. Right here. We're going to, this is page 539. This one, we're actually using the common numerators. It says to compare 4/8 and 4/6 using less than, greater than, or equal to. So I'm going to write out those problems. 4/8, and I'm going to show you the fraction bars, and 4/6. I'm going to grab my 4/6. So if you had to compare these, we've got 4 out of 8, we've got 4 out of 6. Their numerators are the same. We've got common numerators. This was the tricky one. eighths are actually smaller pieces than sixths. We took the whole, we broke it into 8 parts, and I'm only giving you 4 out of the 8. The other side, we took the same whole and broke it into sixths, and I'm giving you 4. So you can clearly see from our fraction cubes that 4/8 is less than 4/6. So on your page, this is page 539, you should show the symbol 4/8 is less than 4/6. You may want to write it underneath so that you are very clear if your teachers ask you to show them the work. I've been asking my students to send me pictures and things of what they're doing. So you want to be very clear that you understand the symbols and that you know where the arrow has to point. The arrow always points to the smaller fraction or the smaller number. So basically that's it, boys and girls. We've talked about how to compare fractions when they have the common numerator, which is the top number, or the common denominator. I've shown you bullets of how to go back. If you didn't have something to use, you can use just the fractions themselves to figure it out. It's really not that difficult. You just have to set your mind to it. I hope everyone's doing well, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all in September.